Welcome to Your Brand Amplified, the podcast where we interview marketers, publicists, and brands to learn their stories, what makes them tick, and tips and tricks that make a difference. I am super excited. We have not covered this topic on the podcast yet, so I'm really excited to welcome ST Rappaport to the show. And you are the founder of LifePix University, and you have a really interesting story and journey to the work that you do. So ST, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be speaking with you today.
Awesome. So I'm kind of leaving this very vague because I really want you to share your story and your journey with the audience.
Yeah, so my story started all the way back when I was in 5th grade, about like 11 years old. I was still struggling with reading. And I had gone to a lot of reading tutors, like my parents were paying to a lot of people, and they weren't really seeing any results. Now, I was really happy because I got to go out of class for all these reading tutors, but it wasn't like getting anywhere. So they decided to bring in what's called Feuerstein mediators, or what I like to call, because it's a little bit hard to pronounce and understand, is a brain coach, where basically instead of doing any sort of reading, we worked on how the brain actually thinks, or more specifically on the 28 thinking skills. Because thinking isn't one big thing. Thinking is made up of these 28 skills that we all have naturally, stronger ones and weaker ones. But those weaker ones are making it challenging for us to do what we want to do. So in my case, it was making it challenging for me to read. But once I improved the thinking skills, because I wasn't just focusing on specifically reading, but rather what was causing it to be a struggle to read, the thinking skills, not only did my reading get better, but so did all other areas in school, like socially, confidence, like everything related to those thinking skills became better. And at that time, I decided I wanted to learn it, but I didn't realize. It took me a little later on to realize like how awesome it was, and a whole nother story there that made me realize that like, okay, this is being my life, not just I want to learn it.
Wow. Okay. This is amazing. And this is definitely not something I've ever heard about or explored. I will say I have a daughter who has decided she's going to get her PhD in neuroscience. She's really interested. So I'm like, okay, I have to share your website with her.
I need
to share all of this. Yeah. So I'm excited not just to learn how I can be better as an entrepreneur and business person and in life myself, but I'm excited to pass this information on to her too. And I love the fact that you took something that was a difficulty as 5th grade, and you've turned it into a passion in your life's work. So can you unpack, because you teased out a little bit, you said there was another thing that happened that made you realize like this is your life. So will you please share that with us if you feel comfortable?
Of course. So the process of learning this takes a few years. I mean, like you could work on it while you're learning it, but to really get the whole thing takes a few years. And in that process, I also took a course by Tony Robbins. It's called Rapid Planning Method, where you plan based on motivation instead of your to-do list. And I thought that was really cool. Like we all talking about like these long to-do lists that we have to do. And here he's like saying, no, like what are you actually motivated in life? And based on that, like what you want to do in life, that's how you should plan your day, which if you think about it, makes sense. Now, the problem was I couldn't really implement a lot of what he was talking about, because he was saying, don't think so much about your to-do list for today, right? Think about 6 months, think about a year or 10 years, like think about the future of what you want. And you should be doing today what like is working towards that big goal. Now, at that time, I considered myself a really productive person. I would plan my day every single day the night before, and I would get things done. If you asked me to do something, like it happened right away. In my business, I would work, like I would get things done really at the time. Like I wasn't a procrastinator, but I couldn't do this, like thinking in advance, thinking long-term, thinking the big picture, because I was so focused in the moment and getting everything done right now. Then I went to take another training in this Feuerstein method that I'm trained in, that I use to help people improve their brains. And we worked on a specific one of the 28 cognitive functions called categorizations. Now, categorizing is not just about being able to put it into groups like big, small, medium, or red, yellow, green. It's also about being able to see like random items and being able to put those in a group together, right? A simple level, I was able to categorize no problem. But when it came to more abstract or not more complex things, I really struggled to put them in groups. So going back to the planning, because I was so much doing it right now, I couldn't see how this task could be good together with another task. So let's say I have errands to do, like, oh, I realized I needed to do an errand. I would go right now. Now I'm realizing it's okay if it waits a few days when I do all my errands together, and it will just save me a lot more time instead of having to go out, going to all the stores, right? And in that way, I thought I was being productive. I'm getting it done today. Like, I'm not waiting. Like, people procrastinate till Thursday. No, like, I'm doing it today, right? But really, it ended up wasting a lot of time. So after I improved this cognitive function of categorizations and being able to see that big picture, I was able to now go back to this RPM, to this Tony Robbins planning method, and being able to plan in the big picture and be able to see accordingly. But once again, here I'm solving the core issue. I'm solving how my brain is thinking. So now I was also able to think bigger. Up until then, I only said I could work with people one-on-one because I want to give everybody their personal attention and really be able to help them. But once again, it was with how my brain was thinking about it. Really, I could work with a group and still give everyone personal attention, right? So today I work just with 6 people, but it's everyone gets their personal attention all at the same time. So I now can work with more people at a time, right? Like, it's also thinking bigger. So it really happened with like everything. My goals became bigger, thinking ahead became bigger. And it was then that I realized that even like high functioning adults who are running businesses, who are doing incredible things, who are really busy and they're really capable, but they still have these weak cognitive functions that are making it a little bit harder for them to do some of the things that they really want to do.
Yeah, that is definitely true. And I know part of your bio talks about, your confidence grew. You figured out how you could think bigger, and you also saved more time each week by implementing the things that you were being trained in.
Yeah. Exactly. None of it, like, I consciously worked on thinking bigger, right? Like, or I'm consciously worked on my confidence, but by solving those core issues, like how my brain was thinking, these things happen naturally. Well, yeah, if now my brain isn't worried about like any struggles that might come up, or I know that like business is about like putting out fires and I'm going to have to put out fires, but I know I have the ability to be able to figure out exactly what to do and I'll come to a good conclusion. Yeah, my confidence just goes up, right?
Nice. And you said there are 28 different
cognitive functions. Yes. Thinking skills is just easier to call them 28.
Yep. Awesome. So you went through school. Is this a degree program? Is this a certification? Did you go to university and then add this on? Or what was that journey like for you?
Yeah, so it's just a certification. Like I said, there's like multiple like certification parts through the whole process of it. Because I knew about this from when I was in 5th grade. Like, I always knew I wanted to learn it. So when I was 17, I actually started learning it. I actually really still didn't like school even after this. And so I wanted to like drop out at 16. My parents were like not going to have it. So what I did was I just did my GED at 16. And then I went to college in England because there they finish high school at 16 and they start like college at that same age. Their college is a little different sort of program than they have here in America, but I was still the same age as them and still able to go to college. So made my parents happy. I just did art there and had fun and like did some other stuff. But it was in that time that I started learning also like out of college on the side. I started learning this Feuerstein method. So from 17, I started learning it.
Wow, that's so cool.
Yeah.
So what are some of the top of the 28 thinking skills that entrepreneurs and business owners need to perform better in our day-to-days? Because I know I have overwhelm. I mean, thinking about this week, I was supposed to be at a conference. I had a family situation happen. So I ended up going, oh, great. I have 3 days clear on my schedule because I was planning to be at this event. And I have all these things I can get done. And I ended up filling up today with podcast interviews for my podcast. And, I got a lot of stuff done, but there's so much more. And so this is something I've been thinking a lot about. How do I get better at my cognitive function? And exactly all the things that you're talking about, like grouping things together, thinking big picture, making sure I'm doing the right things at the right time, and that I'm blocking out time properly for those so that I'm not working all weekend, working in the evenings, all those things that you think of as like just the entrepreneur mindset, but really shouldn't have to be there if we have trained our brains, if we have trained ourselves better.
Yeah, I always like to say like productivity is not a doing problem, it's a thinking problem, right? It's like how you think about the tasks. And if you just think about them a little differently, then it will be a lot easier for you to do. So with 28 cognitive functions, these are like foundational, like small thinking skills that technically like we're all pretty much think we know we're good at, right? Like I thought I was good at categorizing, but like apparently it was affecting me a lot. Or like comparing, again, like a lot of people think they're good at it, but like if you struggle with making decisions, you are struggling with comparing, being able to compare things on the right level, being able to decide what's most important and making your decision based on your comparisons. So what's interesting is because they're like these foundational skills, in order to do any task, you need to use a few of these skills. Okay. Now, let's say I'm going to say, for example, let's say time management. If you're like planning your week, right? You need to use multiple of these thinking skills. You need to be able to use the cognitive function of time, like understanding how long things take. You need to be able to compare so you could prioritize. You need to be able to use hypothetical thinking. Like if I do this first, it makes that first, right? Or planning is also part of time management. All this are these different skills. So if you're struggling with time management or planning your week ahead, you could be struggling with it for a different reason, like than somebody else, than your friend who's struggling with it, because you're struggling with it, let's say, because you struggle with the cognitive function of time, while they struggle with it because they struggle with the cognitive function of comparing, right? And we both think that we're struggling with time management, but for a little bit different reasons. So really what you want to do is identify which one is your weaknesses. I know it's like not exactly the answer to your question of what's our like top cognitive functions, but every person is going to be different depending on their things. So instead, can I like share how you could identify them yourself? Like as you go. Amazing. Yeah. So like, I like to think of like procrastination as a sign, or even if you're not procrastinating, but there's like a task that like you really don't want to do and like you hate doing it. Think about what is the moment or like what part of that task are you dreading or you're like not interested in doing and like this is really overwhelming. Right? Because that is the part related to the cognitive function that you don't like. So like, maybe we could like give an example, like maybe you or like a listener that, you know, like what's something that they really don't like doing in general?
So let's take an example. Entrepreneurs have to wear so many hats, right? And small business owners when you're first starting out. And we're definitely not good at everything, but you have to at least be proficient enough when you're starting out. I think one thing that most people don't like to do is figuring out, let's say, the financial side, the bookkeeping. How do you keep the right records? How are you billing people? All of that process, making sure your taxes are filed, or like all the different paperwork that you have, if you have employees versus contractors and insurance and all of those different things, like keeping track of all of that stuff and making sure that it's paid on time and, you know, that you have a system.
Yeah. Like finances is a big part of business, right? Like we need the money. Without money, like you have no business, right? Right? Like this, so there's different ways we could go down here. If you're speaking to someone specific, I would try to ask them, what is the point that they don't like most? But like for sake of conversation, I'm just going to like say, like, let's say they get overwhelmed. There's like so many, like I can't keep track of this client owes me money. This client paid me extra on this point. Like I have to talk to my accountant and like, I have like, just like all the information of the finances is like all over the place. Right. So that very possibly would come from the cognitive function called clear perception. Clear perception is taking in information in a clear and organized manner. Okay. So now you're listening to this episode, right? You're like taking in the information I'm saying, hopefully in a clear way. But if you're also driving and there's like cars coming and whatever, you're not taking in any information clearly. There's just like things flying everywhere, right? Like you're not being clear about it. So sometimes we're really good at it, like when it's on a smaller level, when you're, let's say, just focused listening on the episode. But when there's a lot of information, it gets a lot more overwhelming for us, right? Because it's harder to take the information in a clear way. So the best thing that you would want to do is, first of all, ask yourself, we take information in through our 5 senses. So go through the 5 senses and ask yourself, like, what do I see? What do I hear? What do I taste? What do I smell? What do I touch? In this specific example, it would basically be seeing, but like, what do I see? Take a moment, just be like an observer and like observe the situation. What do I see? I see this bill and I see this email, and just like list all the things. So your brain is like, has to slow down to take in the information in a clear way. And then like to actually get into it and to be practical about it, about like, how are you going to use this clear perception, is to ask yourself, what is the starting point? Not like my whole finances. Like right now, that's really overwhelming. What is the very first thing I need to do? And then like some people are like going to be like, I don't know what to do. There's so much to do. Like you literally like need to open up your laptop, open that email. Like that's like the first thing, right? Like when you're starting to think about everything, yes, your brain is getting overwhelmed by all that information. So just think of the first step and your brain will be able to work on from there.
Yeah. I think that is something that happens with a lot of different tasks, the ones that we don't want to do. we avoid doing them. But then once we take that step and start doing them, we're like, oh, this isn't as bad as I was thinking it was going to be. Right.
Right. Because like once you get in it, then your brain's starting to get clear about it and starting to take the information away. Like before you're like just thinking about it and the information's just everywhere. But then like you sit down there with your laptop, with your pen, with your paper, and it's like, hey, I actually know what I'm doing here. Or like this actually makes a little bit of sense.
And I know one thing that you like to touch on is focus. And I think to your point, when we're talking about this in concentration, there are so many distractions in our lives and so many things that are calling for our attention at any one time. And we're told to use a number of techniques, whether it's subliminals, meditation, deep breath work, yoga, Pilates, exercise, whatever that is. Or if you are like me and you have ADD, taking medication for that. So what are some ways that you've been able to help people create more focus? And what does that look like?
Okay, well, first, before I answer the question, I have to say now I know I am vibing so well with you because I love the ADHD like energy and like the way their brain thinks. And a lot of my clients are like that. And it's just fun. So that makes sense. Just disclaimer first. But basically, this is how thinking actually works in your brain. Okay, there's a part of your brain called the parietal lobe. Now, the parietal lobe is the part of your brain that's in charge of focus, right? But it's also in charge of the sense of touch. Now, usually you're not using your sense of touch because you know what something feels like. So as soon as you see it, as soon as your brain see it, before you even touch it, your brain is assuming what it's going to feel like. So before you pick up your phone, you're not like touching your phone. Your brain saw it. It touched it hundreds of thousands of times before and knows exactly what it's going to feel like. The only time you really do use the sense of touch is either if like it's a surprise, like for some reason your phone's a little wet or sticky or whatever, or it's like a brand new thing and you've never felt this thing before. So now your brain is actually feeling it. So compared to the other senses, it's not very well developed. And that means the parietal lobe, the part of your brain that's in charge of touch, is also not very well developed because you've been struggling with focusing and you've not been using your touch. So that same part is just not well developed. So you could either like force yourself to sit there and focus, which I don't know, hasn't worked well for me, or you could develop your sense of touch and you're going to automatically improve your ability to focus.
That's so interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
So how do you improve your sense of touch?
Yeah. So we want to take away our eyesight because then what we're doing is we are forcing ourselves to use our sense of touch. So there's two activities that like you could do at home to improve the sense of touch. But I am going to warn you, it's like not going to be like an overnight thing and you're not going to see results like tomorrow. You're going to have to do it multiple times. This is like extra fun if you could do it with like your family or your friends. So that way like it becomes more of something that you're consistent about or like put it into your routine somewhere where you know you'll be able to do it. Like I know like clients come to me like for 3 days, we work like for 3 days straight. And then they're like focusing, right? Like because they worked so many hours. But if you do 20 hours across like 20 weeks, you'll be fine also. So here's what you could do. Have someone take random items from around the house and put it inside like a non-see-through bag. And then you're not seeing, you stick your hand inside and you have to feel what it is. But don't just like, feel it and be like, hey, like this is a water bottle, right? Like, or this is a piece of Lego. You want to get into the actual details, like really feel it. So you're like, you have to use that sense of touch, right? Like, is this Lego have 6 holes, like top pieces on the top, or does it have 8, right? Like really get into as many details as you could. Like go slow, it takes time, and yes, you will feel it in your brain. So like it will hurt you. Like you're going to feel like your brain is hurting, but your brain's just working. The other thing you could do is you could either take like puff paint. Do you know what I'm talking about? Like the paint that dries. Yeah. Like high up, or hot glue. Like if you don't have puff paint, you could also do hot glue, like glue gun, because it also dries, right? Like when it dries, it's like high. Now that's the point of what we're trying to do here, is that you together with your friends or your family or your kids, like really anyone, make pictures for each other, have them dry, and then afterwards blindfold yourself. And again, same thing, use your fingers, use your whole hand to really feel these pictures and try to figure out what they are. But just like before, don't just say it's a flower. It's like, is it 8 petals or is it 9 petals? Like really figure it out. It takes patience. It takes time, but so worth it. I had a lot of clients who like went off meds for me afterwards and things like that. So like, it's really, really powerful. I'm not a doctor and I'm not telling you to do that. And please don't, but it's very powerful.
That is really interesting and insightful. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. It reminds me of when you're little and it's like Halloween and you have to feel, you go to like a Halloween event, carnival at school or something, and like feel these different things. And what do you think they are? And they're like, ooh, it's gooey eyeballs. Or they're trying to make you think they're things that they aren't.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like you could do it for yourself also, like throw a party for your friends and like everyone has to bring a box with something inside of it that everyone has to feel, right? That's a great idea.
So you said you moved from working with clients just one-on-one to once you improved more of your functions, you were able to take group work. So what does working with you look like? Is there like an assessment tool on your website that people do? It's kind of like a little mini intake form or to see kind of where they are, or like just walk us through that process.
Yeah, so that assessment is really for anyone to take, whether you work with me or not, but just for you to be aware of which one of your cognitive functions you need to work on first. It's at lifepixuniversity.com/CF, or just like you said on my website. But it just goes through the 20 cognitive functions, and you'll see that there's no like right or wrong. They're on a scale from 1 through 5 because you can always improve your cognitive functions. Just because you're at a 5, it doesn't mean it can't get even better, but it's like in relation to everything else, like I'm pretty comfortable at it. This is not a priority right now to be working on because I have some other things to work on first. But actually working with me is a 90-day program where we work in groups of 6. So yes, you can still get your personal attention, but you also get to work together with people who are also improving their cognitive functions. So you have the same language, you have friends who are like in business together with you, working on the same things, improving the same things, and you get to like mastermind together. And what we do is we meet twice a week on Zoom where we do specific brain exercises. So I like mail you like sheets that look like fun sheets. They're like dots with like shapes on it. And you essentially have to like find those shapes. Now, while you're finding the shapes, I am watching how you're approaching the paper, because the same way you're approaching the paper is the same way you approach life. Okay. So for example, if it's one very common thing that happens is like people like, it's really easy in the beginning and they get very hard, they get like very excited and they just start doing it and like good and they have no problem. And then like it comes like towards like 2/3 of the way down and all of a sudden it's like really challenging and there's like, they have no strategy and they have no way of being able to figure this out. And then they like just want to give up. So obviously I'm not going to make assumptions and stuff, but if there's a pattern, I'm going to start noticing that like this person, they jump in, they take action, they do things, but as soon as it gets challenging, they just want to give up, right? So we want to help your brain develop strategies, A, so you don't get stuck, and B, when you do get stuck, how to be able to move forward.
Okay. Are there any case studies or examples you can share of clients who've worked with you and some of the aha moments and things that have changed because of this work?
Yeah. So before like I've shared official case study, like I just want to share this fun story. It's one of my favorites because like it shows how the cognitive functions isn't just like on what you're trying to work on. So even if you're working on cognitive functions, so that way like you have more systems in your business and like things flow easier, it affects every area of your life in a really good way. So as once working in a business where I would like go in to work with all like the C-suite executives. So they had like a private group with just them. And there was this lady who like everything like had to happen a bit like me, but in a little bit of a different way where like everything had to happen now and she got really stressed. Like she couldn't like put things off for tomorrow. And it really affected her life on many levels because she would stay up really late and she would wake up really tired and she didn't have time for family because she was busy doing things that like were important. She couldn't like prioritize and like, etc. I could go on, you know what I'm talking about. And one day she comes in and she says, she's like, my husband asked me if I'm seeing a therapist because apparently her husband didn't know that she was doing this. And it was like close to holidays. So she had like a lot of things happening and a lot of things that she had to do, but she decided she is going to prioritize and just go to sleep early right now. Going to sleep is more important than doing some of these like extra wrappings and extra things that she had to do. Like that was okay if it happened the next day. And he like literally thought she was going to therapist to like, he haven't seen her in like older years married her be able to do that. And she's like, no, I'm just working on my brain. And he like had to come back into the office the next time I was there to like come and meet me because he didn't really believe it. Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah. So that's that story. A lot of my clients are coaches or like in the service space industry, like doing done for you services, things like that, consulting. And this client was a business coach. She was like helping people like with their business. I find it funny sometimes like how different people choose different industries, but like from their perspective, right? So like I don't know if I would have ever hired her for a business coach, not because like she was not an amazing person, but like because of how she approached business from getting to see like an inside view. But like she helped people really be able to like have their mindset. Maybe like mindset for business would be more of a better thing. Yeah. But she was great. I loved her. She's so much fun working with her. And anyway, she came in and she was working, she had a lot of one-on-one clients and she was getting like overwhelmed by a lot of there was just too many clients and she knew that like she had to do something different, but she didn't want to do group coaching. She couldn't like create systems. And what we figured out was really wasn't so much that she didn't have enough time to do so many like one-on-ones. Technically that could have happened. What she needed more was how she approached organization of her business and what she prioritized. So for example, instead of doing like coaching every day, 5 days a week, scattered throughout things, she now made 2 days of coaching where she coached like 8 people a day, which is a lot and is really tiring. But then she had a day off, like where she just didn't do anything in her business. And then she had 2 days where she called like CEO days, like one day where like she was just like organizing things and one day where she was working more on like batching projects and like podcasting together. And like all of a sudden now she was able to fit more clients in, but was also, she now actually had an additional day off that she just took for herself because she now organized her things a little bit differently.
Yeah, that's very cool. I think that's what we all strive for. It's why people get into business for themselves or want to start small businesses so that we can have that balance. But then to your point, many of us are not good at figuring out how to actually get there. So
yeah. And it's not that we can't. It's not that we can't at all, right? It's one of the things like in general, like you always want to be learning and always be like taking courses and working with coaches and like, right. Like, and reading books, like listening to podcasts like this, right? Like you're working on yourself to help you be able to get there. But because of our weak thinking skills, we've been thinking this way our whole lives. So it's really challenging for us to like just come up with a solution because our brain really thinks this specific way. When someone on the outside comes and shows us a new way, then either we try it, we adapt it, and like our brain learns how to do it, or we resist it because we think that our way is better only because we've been doing it that whole way, right? Like going back to my example for a minute, like I really thought doing everything now was the best thing because I wasn't procrastinating, but it wasn't the best thing, right?
Right.
So we have to really change how we actually approach business in general.
And so going through this process and improving your cognitive functions, can this also help improve your IQ?
Yes. So first of all, IQ isn't static because IQ like tests you where you are right now and your IQ could go up or down, right? So to answer your question, there has been like some studies and like research on it, but like approximately 70 sessions. I know that's a lot, but like 70 sessions of doing these Feuerstein method raises your IQ by a number, like officially. The sessions are they're not like a structured thing. Like this is what you're doing every single time. It depends on the person and it depends on what. I'm sure there are some people it happens when they're 30 and some people it happens by 100, 150, right? But it does make you smarter and it does most definitely take your IQ. What's also interesting is it could actually change your results on like personality tests. Not that it changes your personality, but the way that you approach things could be a little bit different. So it affects the results of personality tests.
Yeah, that is really interesting because there are so many different kinds of personality tests. And a lot of times companies want to use those, how to best work with somebody. So the fact that that can actually change over time too.
Yeah. But like, I don't want to get people scared. Like, this doesn't change your personality. I like to think of it as like adding tools, right? So you already have like a hammer. You already approach things one way. Now you're also getting a screwdriver and you could approach it another way. And you have a choice to choose for the situation. Is it best to use a hammer or is it best to use a screwdriver?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's really cool. Thank you. So you went to school in England. You were still learning this. At what point did you practice this work in England or did you wait till you moved back to the United States? What did that journey look like for you?
Yeah. So I started learning it like 1 year in there. So the next year, I was working with kids. At that time, it was before I did the training for the categorizations. And in the beginning, I thought I would do it with the kids. So I first worked for a couple of years with kids. And even once I did the categorizations, like it took some time to like I fully got into just working with adults.
Very cool. Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. So is there anything that you want to share about this work? Major key takeaway for anybody who's listening so that they can understand how they can make these improvements?
Yeah. One is for themselves and one is for other people, but really they're both for themselves. So I'm going to start with the one that's for themselves because it's a little bit more popular and people might know this, but a lot of this comes from the concept of growth mindset. I don't know if you've ever heard or read of the book Mindset by Carol Dweck. Carol Dweck was a psychologist in Stanford University, and she wanted to know what makes a person successful, business and sports and school. And she discovered it has absolutely nothing to do with IQ, talents, where you come from, any of the above. Like it has to do with whether you have a fixed or growth mindset. So growth is like always learning, always wanting to grow, and fixed is thinking the way you are is the way you're going to always be. But it goes a step further than that. Growth is willing to take risks. Growth like focuses on the process. Growth wants to learn, doesn't see failure as a bad thing. The only way something's a failure, like if they quit. So if they make a mistake, they learn from it, they get up, they move on. They like actively seeking feedback, purposely putting themselves like in challenging situations so that way they actually grow, right? Now, we all have both a bit of a fixed and a growth mindset. If you think of anything that you're good at, you have a growth mindset. The fact that you decided to start your business is a growth mindset, right? Like you're listening to this podcast, that's a growth mindset. But anything that you said like, oh, I can't do that. I can't dance, or I don't know how to draw or whatever, like that's where you have a fixed mindset about it. Now, obviously, you can't say, I'm going to improve myself in every single area. I'm going to ski. I'm going to salsa dance. I'm going to tap dance, right? Like you're going to decide what you're going to put your efforts in. But we all have both a fixed and a growth mindset. And you have the ability to change from a fixed to a growth mindset in anything that you want to do.
Very cool. Okay.
Yeah. So that's the first one. Purposely put yourself in situations and develop in challenging situations and develop your growth mindset. But the second one, like I said, is for other people, but really for yourself, is about when you see somebody making a mistake or like doing something that you think is really stupid. So whether that's their employee or a client or like someone that you're like, I just don't understand why they do this. Yeah. Like even something as simple as like somebody blocked you while they were parking, right? And like you now can't pull out. I'm not saying they were right. That is not the point. What I want you to understand is that the reason why they did it was because of a weak cognitive function. Almost everything that people do is because of weak cognitive functions. So instead of getting mad at them, understand that they have a weak cognitive function. Yes, they still have to change. Yes, but you could still come from an understanding point of view, especially with relationships that you care about, your spouse, your kids, your friends, your colleagues, people like that. Now, I know people like jump in here and say like about emotions and trauma, etc. And like I'm 100% agree with it, but I think it goes deeper. Emotions and cognitive functions are extremely related. And sometimes don't know what came first, the emotions or the cognitive functions, and they both affect each other. So when you improve the cognitive functions, emotions go up. When you improve the emotions, the cognitive functions go up. So if you prefer to think of it like, oh, they had trauma, same thing. You could think of it like that.
Oh my gosh, these are amazing tips. So thank you for sharing them, ST. So I will obviously put your website and links in the show notes. Do you have social media profiles people can also follow?
Yes, at LifePix University, same thing.
Perfect.
LifePix, PIX, yeah.
Awesome, awesome. And do you have a mantra or some words of wisdom or favorite quote that you live by?
Yeah, I go like through the philosophy of like, if you don't give yourself an option to quit, like you're gonna find a way to be able to do this. Like simple example, I recently ran a marathon and like it was really hot and a lot of people dropped out because it was very hot. I'm not getting into what's right or wrong if you should like drop out. If it's hot or not, that depends on your situation. But I know like I'm healthy enough, I'm fine, like nothing's going to happen to me. I'm like drinking enough, taking enough things. And to me, it wasn't even an option. Like it didn't occur to me to maybe drop out because I am hot, taking care of myself. And I gave myself a thing, like no matter what, I don't care if it takes me longer than my expected time, but I'm going to make sure to finish this, right? So when you approach that in like all areas of like, there's no way, like I'm growing my business. I don't know how long this is going to take, right? Like I don't know how long if you set your amount of goals or how many, like in any area of your life, you set a goal, like just don't give up. There's no option otherwise, and you're going to be able to get there.
Thank you so much. Well, this has been a really refreshing and delightful conversation, and I am excited to dive in more to the work that you do. As I said, share it with my daughter and share it with the listeners. So thank you, ST, for coming on the show today. Thank you to the audience for coming back for another episode of Your Brand Amplified and listening to an amazing expert talk about cognitive functions and how to improve them just to do everything better whether it's in your business or in your life. And with that, I'll be back again in a few days with another amazing expert guest. Want more? Check out amplifywithannika.com or follow me on socials at amplifywithannika.